We're now being joined by journalist Javed Rana from Islamabad to discuss the latest updates. Good to see you, Javed.
Thank you.
Now, this is a surprise attack which Israel was not expecting. What are the reasons behind this attack from Hamas, and what is the latest situation in Gaza?
Well, I think it's a sheer arrogance of Netanyahu, because he was saying time and again that it is a military strength because of which the enemy, obviously it was Hamas from his perspective, cannot defeat them. I think he has repeatedly said, and then he was saying that the Palestinian would not have the veto right to decide the fate of the occupied territory. I think in the context of what Netanyahu has been trying to normalize his ties with the Muslim countries, particularly with Saudi Arabia and Pakistan and some of other Muslim states. So I think in that context, it's a big failure on the part of the state of apartheid state of Israel. But let me give you technical details which indicates the scale of the failure the Israelis have been going through. To begin with, I think it's intelligence failures. Their all devices, all the equipments which they had deployed at the border to monitor the movements of the Palestinians, to monitor the movement of Hamas fighters, I think those were jammed by the Hamas. Now Israel, which consider itself to be militarily invincible, I think that kind of myth has been broken. It is no more there. It is altogether a different Middle East. And then obviously it's a failure of intelligence. That means the Mossad's myth that it has penetrated everywhere in Palestine and elsewhere, I think that myth is also over. And very importantly, Hamas also managed to freeze the internet in and around the area which came under attack. That obviously means, once again, the technological edge of the Israel is no more there. And I think this is the second time in the modern history where a smaller political groups, smaller military groups, they have defeated a bigger enemy. We have seen it previously in Afghanistan, where insurgent Taliban had defeated at least 50 countries. The NATO-led 50 countries, the ISAF countries, and they didn't have the technology, but they had the will to fight against a bigger enemy. And I think Hamas had a far better strategy, and more importantly, they wanted to exact the revenge through which Palestinians have been going through. And I think that is extremely important. What Hamas has said, that since Israeli state of Israel, the apartheid state of Israel, has been repeatedly desecrating the Al-Quds Sharif, the masjid, the third holiest site of Islam. And another reason was that these settlers have been raising anti-Islam slogans. They were raising blasphemous remarks, slogans against last prophet of Islam, Muhammad, peace be upon him. I think because of these reasons, Hamas was very active behind the scene. They put their strategy in place at a time when apartheid state was least expecting. And very importantly, everybody has seen the humiliating, disgraceful scenes of Israeli soldiers being beaten up by the common Palestinians and the Hamas fighters. That shows who is strong on the ground. And I think very importantly, again, I would say that the weapons that the apartheid state has is just to kill civilians. They will go for a carpet bombing, something they have already done, and they can kill as many civilians as they wish. But I think when it comes to the military strategy, that is where they are failing. Another very important point, that before this military operation by Hamas against apartheid state, Israel was very close to have to ink a deal with the Saudi Arabia to normalize ties with Saudi Arabia, with other 7 countries, something Israel did not hide it. They have been saying that there are 7 countries with which it is going to normalize ties without consulting a Palestinian, which means abandoning the Palestinian cause. And Saudi Arabia, by the way, was ready to sacrifice the Palestinian cause. And at that particular point of time, I think this military operation was conducted Now the Middle East has been reshaped. Now Hamas is a parallel force. Hamas has basically made all those strategic calculations in jeopardy after yesterday's military operation. They have fought at least in 25 locations deep inside in the southern cities of the occupied territory. That shows how strong Hamas has become over the course of last couple of years. Everybody says it is Iranian which has been sponsoring, which has been backing them up. Yes, it would be. But my understanding is that yesterday's military operation against Israel was also a bit surprise for Iran, because Iran wasn't expecting the scale of the operation, military operation that Hamas has conducted.
Now, Hamas has called on all factions to join this war against Israel. How have these factions responded, and what has been the reaction from the international community?
Well, to begin with, the reaction from the international community is divided on, obviously, the West, Europe, led by the USA. The kind of the statements they have come up with, that shows that they are only concerned about the civilian lives of Israeli. They have least concerned about the innocent people who have been killed over the course of last 1.5 decades. They are all innocent civilians, mostly in Gaza. They are not talking about it. 33,000 among them were children. They are not talking about it. Now they talk about that Russia has occupied parts of Ukraine. They don't talk about that Israel has been occupying Palestinian territory every next day. They are expanding these settlements. Now, the net result is, from all these conclusions which I can draw, that the other groups which Hamas has invited, like that means Hezbollah. Hezbollah symbolically has launched one rocket attack against its disputed territory inside Lebanon, which is controlled by Israel. That is symbolic. Hezbollah at this particular point of time does not want to expand the war, but at the same time it is giving a signal to the Israel that in case it expands its operation against Hamas in West Bank, in Eastern Jerusalem, then there will be consequences. So it is not that easy for apartheid state of Israel to expand this military operation. They have already lost, and no one now can say that Israel enjoy invincibility. Militarily, it is a significant power in the Middle East, but it is not the one which is invincible. That is the impression it created to the Saudi Arabia, and Saudi Arabia was at the edge of selling out the rights of the Palestinians when this incident had happened. Pakistan was in line. I know that my understanding in Pakistan is that military generals were also preparing to recognize Israel after Saudi Arabia, because that was a plan which previous military chief had held. And one of the reasons that the former prime minister was dislodged, his government was dislodged, and he has been now put in jail, apparently on corruption charges. But reality is that there is a political game, international game, as a result of which he was jailed. And part of the reason was that he was not willing to normalize ties with Israel. I think now all those plans, all those games which Saudi Arabia was playing behind the scene, which other Arab states were playing behind the scene, which Pakistan was playing behind the scene in league with the Saudi Arabia, that's all over. They are in jeopardy, at least in years to come. It is the Hamas which is going to dictate its terms. Israel can kill people, it can again and again carpet bombs Palestinians, but it cannot hold more territories as it used to be. If people think that Israel is going to once again reoccupy Gaza, I think that is something easier said than done. Israel has a technological advantage which stands failed now. I don't think it will be that easy to have land troops inside Gaza. It is a thickly populated area, and if Israel dare to do that, certainly it will face a lot of casualties there.
Hamas has taken many Israeli soldiers hostage. What is the latest update on that, and what has the Israeli government said about this development?
Well, I think Hamas strategy has been, going by the track record, that it wants to basically secure the release of thousands of its fighters and common Palestinians who are languishing in Israeli jails. There are at least, my understanding is at least 6,000 Palestinians. Many of them belong to the ranks and files of Hamas. They've been languishing in Israeli jail. I think going by the previous track record, in the return of one Israeli soldier, previously Hamas had managed to secure release of 1,000 Palestinians. And now, this time around, whenever the negotiations take place, my understanding is that certainly Hamas would be able to secure the release of all Palestinians who have been imprisoned on flimsy charges, who have been languishing in Israeli jail. I think that is a strategy which seems to be in place. But more than that, I would repeat to say that the humiliation that the Israeli military has suffered on the streets of Gaza, on the streets of its own occupied territory, I think for a long time to come, it would not forget. And another point is that it is also, it seems, that end of Arab nationalism, which started in 60s by Jamal Abdel Nasser, the Egyptian leader. I think that Arab nationalism has been buried down by the Arab rulers, by sacrificing the rights of Palestinians, by compromising their rights, by having a very cozy, comfortable relation behind the scene with Israel. Many Arab countries have already normalized ties, and some were already ready. I think it is the end of Arab nationalism, and more importantly, it is a basically awakening of Islamic movement, which Hamas had started, which many other countries in Arab countries particularly have. I think this is going to give them a greater strength. And we know there are terrorist groups which have been fighting in the name of Islam, but at the same time, there are genuine Islamic movements like Hamas, like Muslim Brotherhood. These movements, I think it has given a new strength to them. And these Arab countries in the Middle East, they were built up on the debris of a Muslim Ottoman Empire in the First World War. And I think after almost a century, now it seems that the Islamic movements, which have been struggling over the course of last 1 century, they are gaining strength. We have seen it in Afghanistan. The Americans fought with the Afghan Taliban for 20 years. They failed, and now they have a government. They call it Islamic government. We may not agree with their brand of Islam, but I think it is Islamic government. And now we have seen that the Hamas was also legitimately elected in 2006. It was not accepted by the Europe. It was not recognized by the Europe. It was a democratic government. We cannot call it a terrorist outfit, something which Americans have been portraying, something which Europe has been portraying. I think if Russians have occupied Ukraine territory illegally, in a similar fashion, I would say Israel has occupied Palestinian territory over the course of last several decades. So there is a bigger picture, and I think now it is also a lesson for the settlers. It will be very difficult for Israel now to expand the settlements. The two-state solution, which international community wants, which most of the Muslim countries wants, Israel was not ready to listen to anyone. They were saying there would be only one solution. Israel would stay as an apartheid state. Palestinians would be there as a second citizens. Now I think there has to be rethinking, both for the Europe behind the scene, though they are not saying it publicly, but also within the Israeli government, they will have to think it time and again that the world wants that the borders which were there before 1967's war, I think if two states are established, that could be possibly acceptable to Hamas also, though they are saying they don't want Israelis to be there, obviously, because entire Palestinian territory has been occupied by them, and Palestinians have been expelled over the course of last many decades.
Now, Pakistan has been a staunch ally of Palestine. What actions or statements have Pakistan's leaders given out? And also in Iran, we've seen that the support for Hamas has been massive. What are the latest developments there?
Well, Iran is obviously Iran, Qatar. I think they have come up, probably Oman is also there. They have come up in a very meaningful express support for the Palestinian cause. We don't have here a popular leader, Imran Khan, who has been jailed. Part of the reason was obviously he didn't want to normalize ties with the state of Israel under these conditions. I think now we have an interim caretaker setup. It is the Pakistan's military generals who are running the show. My understanding is that they were following the footstep of the previous military chief who wanted normalization of ties with Israel. So in that context, Pakistan's foreign ministry has come up with a statement which does not represent the sentiments of the people of Pakistan. Pakistan is a 230 million populated country. People, I mean, they love to hate Israel, and they really love the cause of the Palestine, because they think Palestine is not an Arab cause, because these are Arab nationalism. It's a very narrow window. Pakistanis believe it's an Islamic cause, and Muslims anywhere in the world, they have a cause to fight for, to secure the to get rid of Israelis in the eastern Jerusalem. They have occupied the third holiest site of Muslim. I think in that context, people feel very attached with the Palestinian cause. Those sentiments have not been represented in the yesterday's statement, which calls for a cessation of the hostilities from the both sides. It was a kind of a statement which, in a diplomatic language, where Pakistan did not take a clear stand as it used to be in the past, though it did say very rightly that Pakistan wants a two-state solution as it has been agreed upon by everybody through UN Security Council resolutions as the border existed before 1967 war.
I want to talk a bit about the response from the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. He has said that this is not an operation, this is an actual war. What measures can we expect Israel to take now?
Well, I think some of the measures we have already seen. It is a carpet bombing on Gaza, and they are destroying the infrastructure of civilians. Something they've been time and again, Netanyahu has said that Israel would show its military strength, which has already collapsed, and they will kill as many civilians as they can, basically sending a message to the Palestinians, common Palestinians, that they've been supporting Hamas, so they will have to face the music. I think that is the one option which they have already executed, and already Palestinian fighters, the Hamas fighters, are there in the southern parts, particularly in the bordering region with Gaza. I think their priority obviously is to clear that area, which are somewhat a countryside area, and I don't think they have been able to clear the entire area. Some of the hostages probably are still there, but many of the hostages have already been taken inside Gaza, and there is a possibility that those might have been taken to elsewhere, maybe in Lebanon, maybe in Syria, through the tunnels that I assume Hamas certainly would have built. That, going by the track record, that has been the case. But Israel, again, has now one option, which was a political option to basically go for some sort of a ceasefire. Israel would like to adopt that option, but it will take time until it does not kill so many Palestinians, hundreds or more Palestinians perhaps. It needs a face saving. And there are reports suggesting that perhaps Israel is in touch with many players, regional players in the Middle East. It is looking for some sort of face saving. And before that happens, I think it wants to clear up at least 25 locations where Hamas fighters have been engaged, and they have camouflaged themselves in different localities inside the apartheid state of Israel. So I think before all these Hamas fighters are not expelled from the occupied territory and more civilians are not killed, I don't think Israel would be ready to settle down on ceasefire. But again, there is also a bigger picture, and that is that Israel doesn't want to expand this war now, because at a time when Hamas fighters are already there. We don't know how many thousand or how many hundreds, but they are already there. At this particular point of time, it would not like to expand war with Hezbollah in Lebanon. It would not like to expand war, start a war with Iran, because if the Iran comes into, then obviously it will be very difficult for Israel to survive, because it will actually also lead many other Muslim countries to intervene, if not publicly, maybe behind the scene. At least common people will start moving towards the occupied territory. So for Israel, Israel is in a very difficult situation right now. It has very limited options. It has lost its military face. It has lost its political face. It has lost everything that it has worked over the years behind the scene, particularly the normalization of ties with the Arab countries. They wanted to pack up Palestinian, and something Netanyahu was repeatedly saying that that the Palestinians don't have right of veto to decide that with which country Israel should have a normalized ties in the Middle East. So I think now it is a Hamas, it is a Palestinian, which is going to determine that with what kind of relation Israel will have with the Muslim states, because now it is a awakening of basically a cause among the Muslims in all over the Muslim world. Hamas is calling for the Muslims to join them. Hamas is not calling for specifically to the Arabs to come in support of them, because the bigger problem here is that over the course of last so many decades, secular analysts, they have projected that it is an Arab cause. It is not an Arab cause, because by saying that, they are limiting this to the only Arab world. As a matter of fact, it is an Islamic cause, because it is a third holiest site of Islam. So it resonates with the Muslims living in any part of the world, particularly in Pakistan, particularly in Turkey, particularly in Iraq, and other parts of the Middle East.
Another important issue that has been making the rounds is Israel's normalization with the Arab world. Where is this normalization headed now, and what actions, not statements, can we see from countries like Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the UAE?
Well, Qatar's statement has been very impressive, and I think Qatar held Israel responsible for the mess it has been going through, because over the course of last many decades, particularly during last 15 years, it has killed so many Palestinians, it has expanded so many settlements. So Qatar has rightfully held Israel responsible for the embarrassment that it suffered yesterday. Iran obviously has come out in a very meaningful manner, clearly supporting the Palestinian cause. But a statement coming from Saudi Arabia, again, that is more diplomatic. Saudi Arabia took a lot of time to come up with a public statement, but it seems the Saudis are also reconsidering its calculations, because they cannot normalize ties with Israel without consulting, without involving the very cause of the Palestinians. And particular focus would be to bring an end to the expansion of the settlement and allow Palestinians to go back to these settlements, and very importantly, about the custody of the East Jerusalem. Americans have already actually made its capital to the Jerusalem, which should not have been there. Now I think more countries would not be willing to concede Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. I think that is a gone and dead story now.
Javed Rana, thank you for your analysis.
The growing tide of anti-Israel sentiments. What you see behind me is just tip of the iceberg of what is happening in the country. More than half of $52 billion black CIA budget is spent on espionage network in Pakistan. How would you handle it?
The US has looked upon Pakistan as an ally at one point, and then as an enemy at the same time.
That is going to be the first legal reason on the basis of which he is going to be instantly ousted by the Supreme Court of Pakistan.
Joining us live, Javed Rana, who's an expert on politics and geostrategic issues.
In the world politics, which is not being driven by any moral principle, it is being driven by the hard geostrategic realities. In a broader picture, more countries would aspire to have nuclear weapons.